Hello, YouTube friends. Welcome, everyone. Before you get comfortable, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, let us know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Chapter 1. The Rusty Poster. The sun was hiding behind the hills as if it didn't want to see what would happen that night. Sarah and Evan drove for hours on back roads in North Carolina, escaping the hustle and bustle of the city, in search of rural landscapes for their independent documentary about ghost towns. The map they were using was old, a relic they found in an antique store in Asheville, and it showed a small dot that wasn't on Google Maps: Ashcroft. "Are you sure you want to stop here?" asked Evan, adjusting the camera in his lap as the car shook with the bumps of the unpaved road. Sarah, always more reckless, smiled without taking her eyes off the road. "The best finds are not on the internet, Evan. This place doesn't appear in any database. That makes it perfect." They passed an old abandoned mill, its blades still as if they had never turned, and a thick forest that seemed denser than one might expect. And then they saw it, a rusty sign leaning over the side of the road. It said, "Welcome to Ashcroft," in letters barely visible amid the rust and mildew. A spider web hung from one of the corners, swaying in the breeze. There were no more cars, no houses in sight, just a gravel road winding through tall trees, as if the forest was trying to hide what lay ahead. "Let's record this," said Sarah, stopping the car and grabbing her camera. Evan did the same, though something inside him felt uneasy. It wasn't fear yet. It was anticipation. Something wasn't quite right about this place, as if the air was thickening with every mile they drove. They walked with cameras rolling as they entered Ashcroft. After 15 minutes, the vegetation began to give way to structures forgotten by time. Wooden houses with broken windows, an ivy-covered gas station. A sign hanging from a single nail read, "General Store," though the building behind it appeared to have been devoured by the forest. "No graffiti, no recent trash," Sarah muttered. "This hasn't been touched for years." "Or maybe people don't want to come here," Evan replied, pointing his camera at a house with a rocking chair still swaying, as if someone had just gotten up from it. It was then that they heard the first sound, a dry, metallic ringing, like an old bell struck by the wind. But there was no wind, and they saw no bell. They both stopped. The cameras pointed in different directions, recording the emptiness around them. "Did you hear it?" asked Evan. "Yes," Sarah replied, without lowering the camera. "Let's record everything. If this is a montage, it's excellent, and if it's not, it's even better." They advanced along what appeared to be the main street. The cobblestone beneath their feet was cracked, and tree roots were growing through the cracks. There was a church at the end of the street. Its doors were closed, but a dim light seemed to filter in from one of the windows. "Do you want to come in?" asked Sarah, with a nervous smile. "No," Evan answered frankly. But it was too late. Sarah was already climbing the steps. She knocked on the wooden door, and it opened with a creak that seemed to tear the silence of the whole town. The interior was dark. Moth-eaten wooden benches, broken stained glass windows, a dust-covered altar. But on it, someone had left a bouquet of fresh flowers, lilacs, alive, moist. "This doesn't make sense," Sarah whispered, slowly approaching. "Sarah, we shouldn't be here," said Evan, but he couldn't help but follow her. The flowers looked freshly cut. Next to it, there was a lighted candle. The rest of the church was in ruins, but that little corner looked cared for. It was then that a voice, dry and barely audible, emerged from the benches in the back. "You should not have come." They both turned around. There he was, an old man with wrinkled skin like old leather, sitting as if he had always been there. He wore work clothes stained with mud and dried blood. "Who are you?" asked Sarah, stepping back. "Ashcroft. No visitors. Not since 1974. "What happened in 1974? asked Evan, recording everything with his shaky camera. Silence fell, and the people obeyed. But you did not listen to the signs. "What are you talking about?" Sarah insisted. The old man looked at them with glazed eyes, but his voice gained strength. "The forest speaks when the people are silent. The bell is the warning. The flower is the warning. When both appear, the people remember." Evan turned off the camera. Something pushed him to stop recording, as if he were desecrating something sacred. But Sarah wasn't. Sarah took it a step further. "Who takes care of this? Why are there fresh flowers?" "She," replied the old man, "the one who stayed under the ground, but never left. She marks those who enter, and now you are marked." The old man got up, slowly, with a creak of bones. He walked to the door and was lost in the fog that was beginning to creep into the streets. They did not say a word. They simply walked out of the church and back to the car. They didn't look back. But when they arrived, the tires were flat. The tubes were open, and in the driver's seat, there was a lilac one, a single one, still wet. "We have to get out of here," said Evan. "We can't. Not without help." They spent the night in one of the abandoned houses, closing doors with old furniture and placing chairs against the windows. The darkness was total. There was no cell phone signal, and somewhere, in the middle of the silence, the bell rang again. They said nothing to each other. They couldn't sleep. At some point, Sarah looked out the window and swore she saw someone standing under the broken streetlight in front of the house, a pale silhouette, standing still, watching. And in the morning, when the sun was just rising, the old man stood dead in front of the door, in his hand, one more flower, this time withered. The silence under Ashcroft. Chapter 2. What sleeps under the church? The morning brought no relief. There was no bird song, no full light. A thick fog covered the town like a dirty sheet, making it impossible to see more than 10 yards. Sarah and Evan opened the door cautiously and found the old man dead, lying on the porch with a stiff body, bluish skin, and a wilted flower in his right hand, the same kind of lilac that was on the altar. There was no blood, no sign of a struggle. It was as if it had simply died, by no longer belonging. "We can't leave it like this," said Sarah, with a lump in her throat. "Sarah, he's dead. It's not our problem. Our problem is getting out of this place." But Sarah knelt down beside the body, gently pushing the flower aside. Under his jacket, she noticed something strange. A copper bell-shaped pendant, tied with a leather cord. She picked it up, feeling a shiver run through her fingers. What if this place is more than an abandoned village? What if something really has fallen asleep here, and is waking up? Evan was no longer trying to be skeptical. The flat tires, the flower on the seat, the lit candle, and now this. It was all too specific to be a coincidence. However, he couldn't explain it either. "Do you know how to pray?" Sarah suddenly asked. "What?" The old man said that she marks those who enter, that the flower is a warning. What if she's following us? The day had barely begun, but in Ashcroft the weather seemed to move differently. The sun was rising in dribs and drabs, hidden behind a dense fog like a curtain of dust. They returned to the church with the corpse wrapped in an old blanket they found. They did not want to leave it outside. "It doesn't look like he has any family," said Evan as they placed the body on a bench. Perhaps the family was the first to disappear. They entered the altar and looked at the flowers again, but this time they were not lilacs. They were others. Dark carnations, almost black, surrounded the altar in silence. "These weren't there last night," said Sarah. "What if someone planted them while we were sleeping?" Evan spun on his heel, recording with his camera. "What if we're not alone in Ashcroft?" A female voice whispered behind them. Not words, no phrases, just a mumble as if it were a mumbled prayer. They both turned around suddenly. "Nothing? I heard it," said Sarah. "Me too." They approached the back of the altar. The floor was old, cracked stone, but in the center was something different. A trap door. It had a metal ring covered in dust and rust, as if no one had opened it in decades. Touching it, Evan felt a slight tremor. "This is a bad idea." "We're here," Sarah whispered. With effort, they lifted the trap door. A smell of damp earth and decay wafted from the opening. Below them, a staircase spiraled down into darkness. Each step creaked, as if it could not withstand the weight of time. They lit their flashlights and went down. The tunnel under a church did not look like part of the original construction. The walls were of living rock, carved by hand, with symbols that none of us recognized. Spirals intertwined with human figures with empty eyes and mouths open in mute screams. Every meter descended, the air became thicker, more icy. When they reached the bottom, they found a crypt. Not just any crypt. It was a circular chamber with a stone altar in the center. On top, there was a body covered by a yellowish-white veil, as if it had been left to sleep there centuries ago. Around it, extinguished candles and more flowers. Wilted lilacs. Sarah approached cautiously. She lifted part of the veil. The skin on her face was pale, but not decomposed. She looked asleep. "Is that her?" asked Evan in a whisper. "It must be. The one that stayed underground but never left." The chamber shook slightly. Barely a shudder, but enough for dust to fall from the cracks in the ceiling. Sarah stepped back. The bell-shaped pendant she took from the old man began to vibrate around her neck. "He's listening to us," he said, his voice cracking. "We shouldn't have come down." Evan pointed the camera at an inscription carved into the altar stone. It was not in English, nor in Latin, but somehow they both understood. "Here sleeps the mouth of the forest. If you name it, it awakens. If you record it, it remembers you." Evan lowered the camera. "Sarah, turn yours off." Now, but it was too late. A sound came from the body on the altar. A sigh, slow, deep, as if something had just inhaled after centuries of silence. The veil moved, just a little, as if someone underneath was getting comfortable. They ran. They clumsily climbed the steps, not looking back, flashlights trembling in their hands. They slammed the trapdoor shut and pushed the altar back onto it. Outside, the day had darkened, as if the sun had gone into hiding out of fear. The silence was absolute. No wind, no birds, not even his own breath. They left the church, only to find the town changed. The houses were in deeper ruins than before. Some seemed to have collapsed completely. The general store no longer had a roof, and in the center of the street, where there was nothing before, there was now a well. "That wasn't there," said Evan. None of this was like this. Something has moved. They approached the well. There was no rope, no bucket, just darkness. But something could be heard inside. Voices. Many voices, talking at the same time. Crying, praying, pleading. And one in particular, female, whispered clearly, "Sarah, Evan, where are my flowers? Why did you wake me up?" The pendant around Sarah's neck snapped. The bell fell to the ground with a dry sound. And then, out of the fog, figures began to appear, silent, observing, waiting. Chapter 3. The Echo of Those Who Are No Longer Here. The figures did not walk. They floated. No footsteps could be heard. No rustling of branches. Only the rustle of invisible leaves swaying, as if the mist held its own breath. Sarah and Evan backed up until their backs were against the front of the church. The figures remained motionless, standing in front of the well, their eyes sunken and their skin grayish, as if they had just emerged from a tomb without a headstone. And then they saw something that froze them. One of the figures, a woman with long white hair and a black dress. She was identical to the figure lying on the altar underground. Only now her eyes were open, and they were looking at them. She dot, Sarah whispered. She went out. Evan recorded a couple of seconds before the camera died with a static hum. The screen went black. When he looked up, one of the figures was right in front of him, closer than any human being could move. Sarah screamed. The being did nothing. It just looked at him, and then it turned its head slowly towards Sarah. "You don't belong," he said, in a voice that sounded like rotting wood splitting. And at that moment, the ground shook. The whole town shook. The houses cracked with a creaking of old bones. From the well, a thick black substance began to flow, as if something very old had been released. "Run!" Evan shouted, grabbing Sarah by the hand. They ran down the street, but it was no longer the same street. It was as if the town was alive, rearranging its architecture at will. A corner that should have led to the road now led to a row of houses they didn't remember seeing. An alley led back to the well. Ashcroft writhed like an organism trapped in its own cycle. "This is a cycle. That's why the old man said you can't go out once you've been marked." The flower had been the sign. Since they had found it, something had chosen them. It was not that they had come to the village. It was the town that had waited for them. They took refuge in what was left of a library. Dust everywhere, but in the center of the main room was an old journal, open on a table as if someone had been reading it minutes before. Sarah flipped through it. It's from a priest, Father Eustace Granger, from 1901. Listen to this. "The people is a wound. She sleeps under the earth, but she dreams. We cannot abandon her, for the contract is signed. Each generation must offer her flower, and when no one is left to care for her, she will come to seek her flowers among the strangers." Sarah looked up. "That's the key. Flowers. Flowers are like a tribute, an offering to keep her asleep. What if he doesn't have them? Then wake up." Evan looked through the rest of the journal. Among the pages were grotesque drawings. Inverted bodies, roots growing from gaping mouths, a huge eye under the church, and on the last page, a warning. "Whoever enters with flowers can leave. Whoever enters without them stays with her." Sarah rummaged through her backpack. They had no flowers, but they did have seeds. The ones they had found lying at the entrance to the church, wrapped in paper with a spiral symbol. Will it help to plant them? Where? in this dead land. Sarah stood up. The well, it is the heart. If we sow there, maybe we'll reseal it. They walked out, knowing they were at the end of the road. The figures were still waiting. More of them had gathered around the well. They did not speak. They did not move. They just stared, with empty, sad eyes, as if they were waiting for a ritual that had not been performed for decades. As Sarah approached with the seeds, a soft murmur rose among them. One of the wraiths, an old woman with half a rotten face, bowed, not in threat, but in reverence. Sarah knelt at the edge of the well. Her hand was trembling. She poured the seeds into the center and murmured, "This is our flower. Go to sleep, mother of oblivion." The ground shook. The figures disappeared like smoke. The houses began to rebuild themselves before their eyes, as if time was reversing itself. The sky lightened. A ray of light touched the altar of the church, and the well closed. Sarah fell to her knees, crying. Evan hugged her. For the first time since they arrived, there was wind, real wind, and the distant song of a bird. They walked back down the main street. This time, it did lead to the road. The car was still there, the wheels intact. As they crossed the Welcome to Ashcroft sign, Sarah stopped. Will it happen again? Evan didn't answer. He just looked in the rearview mirror, where the town seemed asleep again. Harmless, quiet. It will depend on whether anyone else stops offering flowers, he murmured, or whether anyone else wants to record what should not be remembered. They got into the car and started the engine. The GPS was working, so did the radio. But as they walked away, in the church under the altar, a lilac petal slowly fell from nowhere, and the veil over the body moved again. Nobody gets out of Wicker Hollow. Chapter 1. The Rusty Poster. No sooner had they turned onto Old State Highway 72 than the sign appeared out of the forest haze. It was rusty, with faded white lettering on a blue background. Welcome to Wicker Hollow, home of smiles and peaceful souls. Founded in 1896. The sign was crooked, as if something had pushed it from underneath. Tyler and Naomi looked at each other from the front seat of the rented Toyota Corolla. He laughed nervously. "Who writes quiet soul in a town's welcome?" he said, with that tone he used when he was uncomfortable, but wanted to be funny. "Maybe they want to scare tourists out of the way," Naomi replied, looking at the GPS that had stopped updating just as they took the detour. No signal. Great. The road was narrow and lined with trees so old that their roots seemed to come out to wave from the cracked asphalt. It was as if the forest had swallowed that road long ago, but had remained hungry. They didn't want to be there. They were on their way to a wedding in Cincinnati, but a storm had blocked the interstate. The service area man with a look more askew than the town sign recommended the route through Wicker Hollow. Cut through and you'll see a bridge that connects you back to 32. So he said, but the bridge never appeared. "We should have been here long ago," Naomi muttered, looking at the clock. The hands weren't moving. "Were you also stopped?" "Yes." Silence. Then they saw the first houses. They were not modern houses, not even from the mid-20th century. They were unpainted wood, porous with low ceilings, many with no windows or rotting shutters. They were scattered, as if they had sprouted at random. The people? Well, at first there didn't seem to be anyone. But as they slowed down on what appeared to be the main street, a single grocery store, a post office building, and a mechanic's shop with a fallen sign, they saw movement. A woman watched them from a porch, a stooped figure in a yellowish-white dress, her hands clasped in her lap. She didn't blink. She seemed to have been there all her life, and not because she was old, but because she was fused with the place. A museum figure. Tyler rolled down the window. "Excuse me, ma'am. Do you know if this street leads to the bridge?" The woman raised her head slightly, like a waking crow, and said, "Did you come to see the fair?" "What?" "Today is the fair," he repeated, as if that was all the information they needed. Naomi felt a shiver. "No," he said quickly. "We're lost. We're just looking for the way back to the highway." The woman cocked her head to one side. She smiled. "Everyone is here for the fair." Then he got up and went into the house, closing the door with ghostly slowness. They walked for a while. The car was left next to the store. There was no signal, no map, and the houses kept repeating themselves like a broken video game loop. Open doors with dark hallways, windows with curtains that moved without wind, dolls on porches, always facing the same spot, a hill at the back of town. Over that hill, a barn. Only it didn't look like a barn. It was taller than the trees, with dark red planks and a big iron door that looked like it had been cast with fire. From there came a buzzing sound, as if there were giant beehives inside. "I say we go up there," said Tyler. "What for? From there we could see where to get out, maybe even the bridge." Naomi was not convinced, but they also had no choice. They walked along a dirt path flanked by scarecrows. Lots of scarecrows. Too many scarecrows. "They don't look like stands to scare crows," she muttered. "There are no crops here, not a single field." Tyler paused. One of the scarecrows had a human face, not a mask. A real face, decayed, parched, but human. Eyes closed, as if asleep. "Naomi, look at that." She saw it. "That's not a scarecrow. We are leaving." "Yes." They turned around. But the path, it was no longer the same. The houses were gone. The car, too. Only the barn watched them, and the hill seemed to get steeper, as if it went up every time they took a step back. And then the humming got louder. That sound was joined by another, an out-of-tune carousel sounding from somewhere behind the barn. Laughter, children's music, shouting, a fair. The woman was right. "This is a trap," Naomi whispered. "This village doesn't exist. It shouldn't be here." "How do you know that?" "Because I looked it up before. There's a Wicker Hollow in Tennessee, but not in Kentucky. This shouldn't be on any map. Remember, the GPS stopped working just as we got in." "What about the man in the service area? He sent us here. He knew." They started running down the hill, but the slope never ended. It was like being trapped in a looping frame. The carnival sounded closer and closer, and then the music stopped, all at once. Night fell as if someone had turned off the sun. A dry click. Total darkness. Naomi screamed. Tyler reached into his pocket for his flashlight. He turned it on. A dim, flickering light. It illuminated a figure right in front of them. It was the same woman from the porch, but her skin was cracked now, like dried mud. Her eyes were empty sockets. Behind her, thousands of scarecrows were descending the hill. Only now they were all walking, and they all had human faces, faces that breathed, weeping faces. Chapter 2. The Fair of the Dead. The woman's face, if it could still be called that, was expressionless. She did not speak. She did not move her lips. But a voice, low and distant as an echo in a mausoleum, emerged from the dark hollow where her eyes should be. "The fair awaits you." Tyler jerked backward. inadvertently pushing Naomi away. The flashlight trembled in his hand, casting long, erratic shadows on the scarecrows descending the hill. One of them stumbled, and the body fell with a thud, but it did not get up. It crumbled to the ground, as if made of dry twigs and mummified skin. "Naomi, run!" She didn't need to be told twice. They turned on their heels and ran into the forest, which now seemed to have engulfed the town completely. There were no more houses, no roads, no cars, only misshapen trees, tall, with branches that crisscrossed like arthritic fingers, closing them off. The sound of the carousel returned, slow and creaking, as if each turn dragged centuries of dust, and with it, a children's song. "Turn, turn, the broken soul. If you enter, there is no other. The fair catches you. It sows you in the earth." "What is that?" gasped Tyler, pausing for a moment, bent at the knees. "A rhyme, a song, like the ones children sing in cemeteries," Naomi mumbled. "It has a warning structure, as if it were a ritual." Behind them, the forest was dimly lit with colored lights. The red of a rusty Ferris wheel, the faint yellow of a row of booths, all out of another era, an abandoned village fair, like those that appeared on postcards from the 1930s. But here, in the forest, alive, they peered carefully. Between the branches, they saw everything. The fair was set up in a perfect clearing, with no undergrowth, as if the forest had cut itself to make room. The tents were moldy but intact, with half-erased gold lettering. "Shot at target, immortal man, carriage of the lost." The strangest thing was the people. There were people, yes, children, old people, whole families. They were all walking, laughing, eating pitch-black candy apples, but their movements were mechanical, as if they were repeating learned routines, as if they were rehearsing a play, as if they were already dead. "This is not a fair. It's a trap," said Naomi. "What do we do?" "The same thing they do in every cursed horror story. We go in, because there's no way out until we face whatever it is that brought us here. Are you crazy? I'm sane. That's the worst thing." They went down to the clearing. As soon as they crossed the tree line, something changed. The air, the smell, the weather. Everything seemed thicker, slower, like walking inside a rotting memory. A woman in a light blue dress with a red balloon approached them. "Would you like a ticket?" he asked, in a soft voice like that of an old recording. "We don't have any money," said Tyler instinctively. "They've paid," the woman replied, smiling with a perfect, too perfect row of teeth. "Everyone who comes to Wicker Hollow has paid with their broken roads." He held out 2 tickets, thin cardboard, stained with something that looked like wax. The words, "Single Step," were written in black, dripping letters. Tyler and Naomi didn't take them, but the woman let go of them anyway, and the tickets fell to the floor. They didn't move. "Do you see that wheel?" Naomi asked, pointing to the Ferris wheel. "From there we could see the way out." "I doubt it will work," Tyler muttered. "Everything works here. That's the catch." They walked among the booths. The lights emitted no heat, but buzzed as if alive. A woman in a glass cage shouted to them from inside, "Don't look back! Never look back!" A target shooting stand had real rifles, rusty but lethal. The targets were family portraits, old black and white photos of people with their eyes crossed out. The children on the merry-go-round did not laugh. They didn't scream. They didn't move. They just spun around, like statues, like trophies. They climbed onto the wheel. The cabin was covered with dust. They sat down. The wheel began to turn, alone, without an operator. The town appeared in front of them, but it wasn't the Wicker Hollow they had come for. It was another. Ruined houses, collapsed roofs, collapsed churches. A city that had been dead for decades. Trees grew between the streets. There were no roads leading out. Not a single vehicle, only dry earth and ashes. And in the middle of it all, a well covered by an iron grate and black candles. That well, Naomi whispered, it's the center. Everything revolves around it. The fair, the village, the scarecrows. The wheel stopped abruptly. There was a creaking sound of old wood. The cabin shook, and then they saw it. A figure was climbing up the side of the wheel, fast, deformed, with limbs too long. It wore a horse mask, but it wasn't plastic. It was a real skull. "Get down, get down, get down," Tyler shouted. They jumped before the cabin reached the ground. They fell badly, rolling in the dirt. They got up covered in dust and leaves. The horseman was following them, now running on all fours, snorting like a beast. They ran to the well. The iron lid creaked under their feet. They opened it. It was deeper than it looked. There was no bottom to be seen, only a faint glow and a smell of old blood. "We have to go downstairs," said Naomi. "What? Are you crazy? All this is a bait, an illusion. The fair, the people. We can't go out from the top, only from the inside, only if we go down." Tyler hesitated, but the creature was already upon them. They grabbed a rusty rope hanging from the edge of the shaft and began to climb down. The descent was slow, agonizing. The shaft vibrated. The stones oozed thick liquid, like living ink. Voices spoke from the walls. "Once you go in, you never go back, but you can remember. You can remember." Downstairs, they found a door, made of bones and sinew. When they touched it, it opened by itself. Behind, a tunnel. And at the end of the tunnel, the original version of the town, the real Wicker Hollow. Not the current one, but one frozen in 1933. Clean streets, children playing, a newly installed fair. But everything was silent, as if watching a movie without sound. "This is a memory, an echo," Naomi whispered. "What if we are dead? I don't think so, not yet. But this town is. It died in 1933. Everyone who enters gets caught up in its repetition." They walked among the echoes. They saw the origin, a preacher, a sect, a promise. The soul can be preserved if it is harvested at the right time. And then, the ritual. The fair was used as a stage, the well as a channel. The whole village was the sacrifice. Naomi knelt down. She touched the ground. Souls screamed underneath, waiting to be released. "How do we break this? The fire. It's always the fire," said a voice behind them. It was the woman on the porch, but in her human form, young before the ritual. Burn the heart, the well. She disappeared, and the echo ended. They climbed back up the well, but now they knew what to do. They took black candles, poured oil from the huts, picked matches from a forgotten store, and they lit the fire. The well screamed. The town trembled. The fair creaked like a dying beast. The lights went out. The carousel stopped. The scarecrows collapsed. And for the first time since they entered, they saw a clear sky. They were on the hill again, just them, and the road, and the crooked sign, which no longer read, "Home of Smiles and Quiet Soul." Now it said alone, "Come back if you wish to forget." Chapter 3. The return is a lie. The fire was still crackling behind them as they descended the hill, not looking back. Naomi was breathing hard, her face smeared with soot and ash. Tyler was limping, His ankle had hurt since they jumped off the wheel, but he wouldn't stop. The road was there, in front of them, the gray, uneven asphalt, covered with dry leaves and branches that crunched under their feet. The road. After hours of madness, walking scarecrows, haunted fairs, voices from the well, the exit seemed real, too real. In the distance, a green sign, rusty but firm. Exit 52, I-75, Lexington, 33 miles. We made it, Tyler whispered. Not yet, Naomi said with a frown. I still don't feel the air change. I don't hear birds yet. It was true. The forest surrounding the road was still. No cicadas singing, no insects buzzing, no signs of life. Just trees hunched over, dark, like old men peeping behind a curtain. And the sky, gray, smooth, no clouds, no stars, no moon. Too perfect to be real. They walked along the road for hours, or so they thought. Naomi checked her watch. 2:31 a.m. Tyler checked his. 2:31 a.m. Is it time, or is it not moving? Nothing is moving here. Nothing has changed since we set the well on fire. Naomi muttered. A curve to the right, a fork, and another sign. Welcome to Wicker Hollow, home of smiles and quiet soul. Tyler fell to his knees. No. How is that possible? We didn't go out, Naomi said, coldly. We just woke up Wicker Hollow to its next form. The fair was no longer in the clearing. Now it appeared at the edge of town, above the soccer field of the old high school. The lights were dimmer. The carousel was spinning faster. And the children were now watching them. They were no longer statues. They watched them with crooked smiles, eyes completely white, as if they recognized them. One of the booths had been transformed into an altar of sorts. On the platform were photos of Tyler, of Naomi, of their friends, of people they didn't know but with the same empty eyes. Naomi took one of the photos. On the back it read, "Offered, not found." What does that mean? Tyler asked. It means we weren't victims. We were brought in. Someone brought us in. Who? Then they saw it. An old man, sitting in a wheelchair next to the altar. He wore a hospital gown, but his neck had a medal with the symbol of a black spike, the insignia of the old cult. I was the last before the silence, he muttered. And now you are the first of the new cycle. Naomi approached him. What is Wicker Hollow? It is a place that forgot to die. When the sect fell apart, the town got caught in the middle. It's not on the map. It's not in time. It just floats. Waiting. Waiting for what? Somebody remember. Someone light the well. Somebody break the silence. And what did we do? Tyler asked. The old man smiled. They gave him a voice again. A dry thunder cracked the sky. The earth trembled, and from the ground, in front of the altar, a figure began to emerge. First it was a shadow, then twisted flesh, a body formed by multiple bodies, amalgamated like melted wax, faces without eyes, fused arms, multiple voices, the heart of Wicker Hollow. The thing spoke, and its voice was choral, men, children, women, even babies crying and singing at the same time. They have opened the doors. They've put names in stone. Wicker Hollow no longer needs to repeat itself. Now it wants to expand. The creature rose, occupying the entire altar. The lights of the fair went out, one by one, and with each switch off, something changed. Naomi felt her memory fading. She remembered her mother, but not her voice. She remembered the color blue, but not what it belonged to. Tyler cried. They're erasing me. I don't know my last name. I don't remember who I love. We have to escape, Naomi shouted. There's got to be a crack, something. They ran into the forest. The branches were trying to close. Roots moved like snakes. The road appeared and disappeared. But then Naomi shouted, "Water! Rivers don't lie." They ran to a dry riverbed they remembered seeing along the way. There, among rocks, they found a stretch still wet. They jumped in, following the riverbed. Voices followed them. Roots tried to stop them. The creature screamed with all its mouths. Wicker Hollow doesn't let go. Wicker Hollow just changes skin. They kept running, hitting rocks, breaking ankles, bleeding, and then the crack. A slit of real sky, pale blue, with clouds, with the smell of real earth. They jumped, and the world cracked behind them like a mirror. They woke up on the shoulder of a state highway. An ambulance and a patrol car were nearby. An officer was looking at them, frowning. "Where did they come from?" he asked. Naomi tried to respond, but the words wouldn't come out. Name, nothing. The agent looked at them with pity. "Two more. The end. Route 191. No one returns from the last assignment." 1. The silence of the tire's night had fallen with a heavy blackness over the vast fields of Texas. Beyond the range of the truck's headlights, Highway 191 seemed to dissolve into a bottomless pit. It was not unusual for Efrain Salgatsu to drive at this hour. After 20 years as a trail driver, he had seen it all. Lonely roads, frightening accidents, men crying on the radio, and even bodies on the side of the road. But tonight, there was something different. Perhaps it was the way the assignment came to him. It wasn't his usual boss, nor a familiar dispatcher. It was a call on his personal cell phone, after midnight. A strangely formal voice offered him a double payment for a freight move from an old silo north of Marathon, Texas, to a supposedly closed refinery near Redford. No company in its right mind would send a truck down that route in the wee hours of the morning, much less with such strict instructions. No opening cargo, no stopping, no talking to anyone on the way, and never under any circumstances taking detours. And yet, Ephraim accepted, not out of courage, but out of desperation. "My son needs that treatment," he muttered to himself, adjusting his knuckles on the steering wheel. "It's not the first crazy thing I've done for him." The clock on the dashboard read 2:14 a.m. I had already crossed half of Route 191, an infamous stretch among truckers. Some called it the dead line. According to stories, the radios would stop working without explanation. The GPS would flicker, and sometimes you could see lights that weren't from any car. Lights that danced like bicycle headlights, but moved as if they were floating above the asphalt. 2. Something moves in the box. It was the cargo that worried him the most. The box was sealed, but not with normal padlocks, but with what looked like stainless steel seals with strange engravings. He had already felt 3 knocks since it started. They weren't like the wobbling of drums or machinery. They were more organic, as if something had been thrown against the walls from the inside. He tried to ignore it. He turned up the volume on the radio, looking for a frequency that wasn't dead. The only thing he managed to pick up was a ranchera song, interrupted by static, followed by a soft voice saying, "He's not going to make it anymore." What the fuck? He turned off the radio with a jerk. His hands were sweating. The air conditioner began to blow colder, as if the system had changed itself. Outside, the desert looked like a sheet of frozen dust. Not a soul, not an animal, not a night bird, until he saw it. 3. The figure next to the sign, 100 meters ahead, under an old rusty sign that read, Kilometer 67, Route 191. There was a human figure, standing still, not moving, like a statue that someone forgot in the middle of the road. Ephraim slowed down, rubbing his eyes. At 3:09 a.m., Ephraim spotted something he did not expect to see in the middle of the desert. A truck stopped on the side of the road. The paint was the same dull blue as his, but more deteriorated, dirtier, as if it had been under sandstorms for years. The headlights were off, the windows soaked from the inside, although there wasn't a drop of moisture outside. Slowing down, Ephraim noticed something else. The unit's number was 4317, exactly the one his former boss told him never to mention. A cursed number among old trailers. Rumor had it that this unit disappeared in 2007. It was operated by a man named Genaro Rocha. He never showed up. His truck, his cargo, his radio, everything vanished on Route 191, and yet, there it was. Ephraim hesitated. A part of him wanted to speed up, but another, the more reckless one, made him slow down. He grabbed the flashlight and got out of the truck. 5 minutes, that's all, he said to himself. He walked toward the abandoned cab. The driver's door was ajar. A dank stench akin to wet meat wafted from inside. As he peered in, his heart almost stopped. There was a logbook. The page was open, soaked in a viscous liquid, barely legible, but you could make out the last thing Genaro wrote. They won't let me open the box. They say if I see what I'm carrying, the trip is over. But something in there speaks to me. It says my name. It promises things. It says it can make me eternal. He says the route does not end in Redford. He says it never ends. Ephraim stepped back, slipping on something slimy. He looked down. It was a tongue. A human tongue, dry, black, split in 3, but with no body. He ran back to his truck. 2. The voices of the trailer. As I moved down the road, the knocking on the box turned into whispers. At first they were muffled sounds, like sobs seeping through the metal. Then they began to form words, different voices, some low, others so high-pitched they sounded like squeaks. They all said similar things to him. You won't make it. The box opens by itself. Your son already belongs to us. Keep us company, Ephraim. Just one more to go. He broke out in a cold sweat. His knuckles ached from squeezing the steering wheel so hard. He took the rosary hanging from the rearview mirror. He squeezed it tightly, but the rosary fell apart. It didn't fall. It didn't break. It turned to dust in his hand. 3. The town that does not exist. About 10 kilometers ahead, the road took him to an unexpected detour. It did not appear on his GPS or in his route memory. A makeshift, handwritten sign read, Refinery, 3 miles. Ephraim hesitated. The instructions were clear. Do not take detours. And yet the map on the board now showed that this was the shortest way. How? Who modified it? He looked back at the main road, dark, empty, alive. And then the detour. He turned, maybe out of fear, maybe because a voice inside his head told him that if he didn't, he would never finish the trip. 3 miles later, instead of a refinery, he came to a town, a place that should not exist. Wooden houses without windows, lighted lanterns with no visible electrical source, a bar with the word welcome written backwards, and people, motionless, people standing in silence in the middle of the street, all looking at the truck. They were dressed like trailers. One of them held up a sign, "Load empty, do not stop." Ephraim braked hard. He rolled down the window. A woman with a white face and completely black eyes approached. "What's in the box, Ephraim?" she asked in a two-tone voice, as if two people were speaking at once through her throat. "I don't know," he answered in a broken voice. "What if what you're carrying is carrying you?" Ephraim accelerated furiously. The truck rammed several of the immobile people. They did not bleed. They did not scream. They just crumbled into white powder. 4. The trail of the missing back on the main road. Something had changed. The truck's radio turned on by itself and began to emit an old audio. It was a man's voice. "Logbook of 2007. Genaro Rocha. I think this is the last thing I record. If anyone hears this, don't stop the truck. Don't look inside. Don't believe the voices. There is no refinery. There's just a stomach, a giant one, and you are the next digestion." The recording was repeated. Ephraim shouted, pounding his fists on the console, but the radio wasn't breaking. The sound was now coming from the chassis' own speakers. Then he saw it, a trail of lights ahead, flickering lights, like flares. Maybe a roadblock, maybe help. He braked. He got out of the truck. He ran toward the lights, and he found photographs. Photos nailed to the ground with rusty nails. Photos of trailers. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. Some of the faces were familiar. There was one of his uncles, another of a fellow trail rider. But what sent him reeling was seeing his own face. A photo of him, with the date of that same night. He screamed. He fell to his knees. He looked back at the truck. The box was open. 5. What came out of the box? Something was emerging from the trailer. It was not a being, not quite. It was like a sack of flesh with multiple small mouths, eyes scattered where there shouldn't be eyes. But the worst thing was its voice, because he spoke like his son. "Daddy, Daddy, get me out of here." Ephraim fell backwards. The thing was sliding along the asphalt, leaving a trail of oil and blood. It advanced slowly, absorbing the light, stealing heat from the air, and after her, more came. Other figures, smaller, like deformed replicas. They were taking the photos from the floor, one by one, and devouring them. Ephraim ran to the truck. He climbed in. He closed the door. He started the truck. The box closed again on its own, with a squeak of live metal. He did not look back, just drove. No GPS, no map, no address. Route 191 was no longer a highway. It was a path to something deeper. A stomach that slowly digests those who accept that last assignment. And he still didn't know if he was escaping or reaching the end. When the clock on the dashboard read 4:44, Ephraim began to hear a new voice on the radio. This time it was not an old recording, nor a hallucination. It was a live broadcast. "Unit 4317, Unit 4317, come in," said a female voice, mechanical, emotionless. "Last call. You are moving out of tracking range. Repeat. Last call." Ephraim, panting, on the verge of tears, pressed the radio button. "Who are you? Where are you?" A silence. Then the answer. "Here, where it all begins." "Tell me what you saw, Ephraim. Tell me what you're carrying." "I don't know what I'm carrying. I just want to get to the destination." The voice responded with inhuman calm. "Destination, Ephraim. That thing you're driving is not going anywhere. The destination was miles ago. What you're doing now is digesting yourself." At that moment, the entire truck shook as if an inner force was twisting it from the bowels. The steering wheel vibrated.